All right, I'm here with Guy Rubin, founder and CEO at Ebsta. Ebsta is a revenue intelligence platform, and I want to talk all things go-to-market with Guy today, both from his perspective being the founder of a SaaS company, but also I think you guys have a lot of data, seeing what other companies are doing with their go-to-market. So I want to dive into that. But maybe before that, if you want to say a couple sentences about you and then Ebsta, and given that we mostly have founders and go-to-market people, maybe kind of establish audience, ICP you're selling to, what problem you solve for them, and then we can dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So hi, everyone. Guy Rubin here, Ebsta CEO. We present Ebsta as an AI-first revenue platform. We just introduced our brand guarantee, so it's probably a nice way of presenting what we do. So we guarantee to increase the number of reps hitting quota. We also guarantee to get your forecast within 10% of your number, and we guarantee to get you live in 30 days. So we have a suite of technology that's integrated into things like Salesforce or HubSpot CRM. And we have a unique approach to analyzing all of the data across your organization over the last year to identify kind of what your top performers are doing differently to the rest of your sales teams. And we're able to use those benchmarks to prompt the B and C players as to what they should be doing next. And that's how we're able to guarantee that we can increase quota sale.
Love it. And just for context, without sharing the exact number, can you give people some idea of range where you are in terms of revenue on your trajectories, just so we can place you somewhere?
Yeah, we're fast approaching 10 million. We have about 350 paying customers. My team are based in Europe. We're a bootstrap business, and that's
impressive.
That's where we sit.
Very cool. And you sell into SMBs and mid-market, so I'm assuming like a 5-figure ACV?
Yeah, it depends. So we've got a kind of a free trial kind of product-led motion for HubSpot CRM customers. They're able to kick off a 2-week free trial at ebsta.com. Average deal values there are probably kind of between 15 and 20 grand. We then have Salesforce customers that are using us mid-market, are paying somewhere between 30 and 50 on average. And then we have our enterprise customers that are paying 6 figures. So that's a real blend.
Given the revenue intelligence, category, would you consider Gong your biggest competitor, or how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, Gong's a really good call recorder, and then they've added on some other features. We have our own call recording tech, but if a customer's already using something like a Gong, we just plug into it. So we're interested in accessing all of the data around your organization. And yes, Gong do some kind of forecasting tools. We go a whole lot deeper, and the approach that we take really drives the right behaviors, the right outcomes for the sales teams. So we're quite happy to work with vendors that are using customers that are using people like Gong, but we can also rip and replace as well if that's the right thing for the customer. The big challenge in the market is that all of these technology, all of these B2B businesses have spent so much money on so many point solutions, and we still see that 4 out of 5 reps are missing quota. Okay, it's just not sustainable, right? We have to have a different approach. And so what we found is that there is a growing gap between our top performers and the rest of our sales teams. And so we built
gap.
Ever growing, yeah. So if you go back, we produced this B2B benchmark report. This is the 3rd year we've done it. And when we started, the average gap between the top performers and the rest of the sales team was 4x. Last year it was over 6, and this year it's approaching 10. So
what do you associate that to?
Top performers understand, the truth is there's lack of consistency across the board. That's the biggest challenge that these businesses have. So if you want to start kind of top of the funnel, the top performers are more than twice as likely to self-source their own opportunities. And the opportunities that they do work tend to be much more ICP focused. So one of the things we have is an ICP score to understand, are the opportunities we're working, do they really match ICP?
But then do you not think they used to do that in the back? I'm curious about why the gap is widening. I understand that there's a big gap. I'm curious why it's gotten bigger over the years.
That lack of consistency is getting wider, or there's more inconsistency across sales teams. And the training we're doing for our sales teams are, instead of training salespeople on how to do the things that AI can't do, like build relationships, build business cases, build trust with the economic buyers, and close business. We spend far too much time teaching them how to do things that the AI can do better than they can, like logging their activity, creating contacts in the CRM, logging the objections that the customer raises on the call, ripping things like medic out of your discovery call and then scoring it correctly. The AI is going to do that a whole lot more consistently than an individual sales rep can. And if you then times that by 100 sales reps, you've got wildly inconsistent outcomes and things being recorded in the system of record. And the AI can do all of that for you. Instead, what we need to be doing is focusing our energy on teaching the sales team how to deal with those objections, how to come across as that expert advisor, and how to qualify much, much better. We see that the top performers, for example, are closing 30% of their opportunities offers lost at that discovery stage, while the B and C players are holding on to those deals on hope rather than expectation.
Right. Do you feel like if the gap is widening, either the best reps are getting better or the worst reps are getting worse? Which one is it?
So I personally believe that all sales reps, all sellers can be top performers. The problem isn't the sellers. The problem is the leadership. We're not giving the sellers the tools they need to be successful. We're not helping them understand what good looks like and helping them to replicate that. We're not giving them the confidence to close opportunities offers lost sooner. We're not helping them understand what their buying committee really needs to look like. We're not scoring engagement. We're not scoring qualification. We're making our sellers' lives a whole lot harder, and in a world that's getting more and more complex, those that are not leaning into the new tech, that are not being a lot more consistent, that are not embracing AI, for example, are being left behind. And so that's really what we're seeing, and why that gap is wide.
I do buy that all sellers can get better. I don't buy that all sellers can be top performers. That to me sounds a little bit like, I don't know, all movies can be great. But if all movies are great, then none of them are great, because great means that it's like it's kind of the definition of it, that relative to everything else that's out there, you're a lot better.
Well, I mean, we see time and again, when you introduce this level of consistency, when you do this level of benchmarking on the deals that have closed, won and lost, once you understand what good looks like, that there's one common thread across all sellers, whether they're good or bad, right? And that thread is that they're competitive. They want to win. And so when you do the analysis, when you look back at the last 1,000 deals, and not at the crap that's in the CRM, but actually get under the skin of the data itself and understand, what are the buying committees look like? How much engagement is required with different stakeholders at every stage of the sales cycle? What does, what are the objections we need to be aware of? What are the competitors that come up that we lose to, that we win to, and so on? Once you've got all that information, once you understand what good looks like every stage of the sales cycle, and you can turn it into pictures, it's very easy to show the sellers how to win. And then it's our job as leaders to encourage them through that journey. And what's interesting is once you show them, look, on average, you're engaging with 3 stakeholders, but when we get 6 or more, our win rates are twice as high. Once you show it to them based on data, then suddenly they want to get 6 stakeholders actively involved in the sales process. When you show them that the VP of operations is, as your champion, doubles your win rates, and you show them the data, guess what?
Right.
The number of opportunities that have got the VP of operations as their key champion suddenly goes through the roof, right? So it's our job as leaders to give them the narrative, give them the coaching and the guidance, and making it easy for them to win. And if we can do that, then we get more sellers winning. And I'm not suggesting everyone can be an A star, but we certainly can bring the C players up to B and B up to A. And it's much better than the alternative, right? Which is, let's get rid of our low performers and then hire everybody else's lower performers and assume that they're going to be great.
When you say 4 to 5 reps don't hit quota, how much of that is just reps needing to get better, using better data and technology, and how much of that is just quotas that are too high?
It's a good question. And the answer to are the quotas at the right place or not will be whether anyone's hitting them, right? So if you've got 20% of your AEs, of your sellers hitting quota consistently, then we know we've got product market fit. Okay, so now what we need to do is, and what makes a good seller at one stage of the sales cycle might not be the same as at another, or on the same sales process. So sometimes what you find is that the top performing sellers are different at different stages of the sales cycle, or even at different go-to-market motions. You might have an SMB motion or an enterprise. You might have a European or a US. So every motion might be slightly different, but the data will explain it to us and help us understand what best practice looks like. And then, our job as sellers, if we're still walking into pipeline review meetings and going, well, tell me about that deal. Okay. And then you get the sales rep, the seller giving you the kind of the blah, blah about, well, they think we're great and they love me and they're definitely going to buy it. None of that makes any sense. None of that's useful. What we need is the managers walking into the pipeline inspection meetings where the rep knows the question that's going to be asked. They can see all the things that are going better than expected on that opportunity. So, congratulations, pat on the back, you're more multi-threaded than we normally expect. But look, I can see in the signals that we're not as engaged as we should be with the CFO, right? You've got a week to turn that around. Otherwise, we're going to close this opportunity off as lost. Now, all of a sudden, we're having a constructive conversation with the seller and they understand what's expected of them rather than just hearing the blah, blah.
Now, you said, it's allowing C players and B players to become B players and A players. Again, how much of that is really just lack of training, coaching, and how much of that is just you made a bad hire and you need to, cut your losses? A lot of that philosophy, especially in startups, is, fire fast, It's so... Is that just a crutch to think that I can just take someone who is a low performer, tell them a couple things, show them a couple things, and then suddenly they're going to be performing really well?
I think that it's the answer has to be that we need to. I'll give you another great example. Okay, we need the right gates and triggers at every stage of the sales cycle. The number of times we go into an organization and we find that the stage progression is not being policed. You've got opportunities skipping stages. You've got opportunities moving backwards in stages. Okay, none of that's appropriate, and that's our fault as leaders, not the sellers. And what we need to do is give the sellers very clearly defined kind of gates and triggers before they leave one stage and move on to the next. And so, for example, if in our organization, if you haven't got a certain level of engagement with a specific C level, for example, then you don't get to leave that stage. And if we can't get the C-level ball in, then the chances are we're not going to close one the deal anyway. So we might as well stay at that stage and make it clear to the buyer that, look, this is our process. We know it works. If you want to go through this exercise, I'm here to support you. But if you don't, that's fine. But tell me now. Let's not waste each other's time.
Yep. What I do like about your messaging is that you put a lot more of the, let's say, responsibility or blame, one could say, on the leader rather than the individual seller. What do you think what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see sales leaders make? Whether that's the founder who just hired the first 2 AEs and is trying to coach them, or a VP sales at an early stage company. What are some of the biggest mistakes that they make when it comes to sales leadership?
First of all, recognize that our focus is exclusively B2B sales. Okay, so if you've got a B2C motion, great. It's just not something I know much about, right? But the B2B motions, I think that the challenge here is really understanding what good looks like. Okay, so one of the things we have to recognize that in B2B sales, relationships drive revenue. So we need to understand that. And one of the things we did out the box, in fact, before we stepped into what we now call revenue intelligence, we developed what we call relationship intelligence, which focuses very much on understanding the level of engagement we've achieved with certain stakeholders during a sales cycle. In fact, not just the sales cycle, but also for the entire customer life cycle. So we've codified what a relationship is, and we score every relationship a business has out of 100. And that tracks over time. So you can see engagement trending over time. So by understanding historically how much momentum or engagement we've needed with certain stakeholders at every stage of the sales cycle, we can encourage the sales team to follow suit. And if they're not seeing that level of engagement with certain stakeholders, we don't get to progress through the next stages. And to add to that, what we saw in particular over the last year or so is the influence that the finance persona has on the win rates. And so if you're waiting to engage with the finance persona, at the point where you're presenting back the solution, it's far too late. We see that the win rates are 14% higher if you can get the finance persona engaged at the earlier discovery stages and get them involved in the business case building. So really understanding which personas are important to the sales cycle, understanding and trying to find a way of measuring momentum or engagement with those stakeholders so that you can hold the sales team to account. And more importantly, you've got an early indicator when engagement starts to drop off. And it's a really good way of knowing that perhaps this deal isn't as strong as we thought it was. And the same for customer success, right? If you do 2 QBRs with the secretary instead of the principal, the chances of churn are 7 times higher. But if you do the last 2 QBRs with the C-level, the chance of the upsell is 4 times higher. So knowing who your team are engaging with is absolutely key, and making sure that momentum is high. We see that the win rates are normally 4 times higher if you can get the engagement from good to great. So we kind of under 80 or over 80 out of 100 is kind of the way we score it.
Have you seen any ways how the best sellers get those, whether it's the CFO or the principals, involved in that decision making? Because I feel like it's not that sellers don't want these people involved. It's just they don't speak their language. They don't have any access to the CFO. They don't know how to engage them or what to tell them to get them to show up to the meeting. It's not like the CFO is interested in enjoying all of these things. They have a busy day. So as long as when they can delegate, they will delegate. So how do you see the best being able to engage?
Yeah, it's a really good point, right? And so when we look at the conversion rates or the win rates, you can see that the top performers are the ones that have got the highest level of engagement with those C-levels. And in fact, even the lower performers, when they do get high engagement with those C-levels, their win rates are very similar to the top performers. So we can see how important it is. So coming back to your question, I think the answer is training our sales team on how to come across as expert advisors. Yep. If you're selling, I don't know, let's say you're selling HR software. Okay, the chances are your buyer may not have bought HR software before. They don't understand that market. They don't really know what the gotchas are and how and what are the things they should be looking for. Now, the number of times, last year we, as well as analyzing 4.7 million opportunities, we also analyzed 1.2 million hours of sales calls and discovery calls. And it's fascinating to see that the difference in the approach of the top performers and the rest of the sales team is vast. Okay, so the top performers are building rapport with the champions or the economic buyers. They're talking to them about the other 7 projects they've got on right now. Where does this sit on their priorities? They're talking about ROI and what is their anticipated ROI? What do they think we can achieve? And then they're comparing that to the other things that that buyer is actually working on right now that might have nothing to do with HR software, for example. Okay, and they're coming to a consensus as to whether this is a journey that we should be going through together. While the B and C players are almost, get through the small talk, sit down, shut up, let me show you how the buttons work. Yeah. Now, when I go and pick up the phone again to that economic buyer, or I want to get my champion to get the economic buyer as a room, if I come across as this kind of guru in my market and I'm here to help, and I'm going to make sure that you reach the right conclusion here, whether it's us or not, suddenly when I call, they pick up the call, they take the call. When I ask for the C-levels to get involved, they're welcoming them in because they're introducing me as this expert advisor that's going to help them on the journey that they're on, rather than an annoying salesperson that wants to show them how the buttons work. Yeah. So it's that, and that's what we as leaders need to be training our sales team to do, and showing them the impact and the power it can have. And if we ultimately, when a customer signs a piece of paper that they're going to become a customer, they have to have built some level of trust with you. Otherwise, they wouldn't be committing. And so the relationship that the buyer builds with the seller is so important. And we have to be monitoring, we have to be measuring momentum and engagement. We have to train and teach our sales teams how to actually build those relationships, how to deal with those objections, and how to come across as an expert advisor, not just an annoying salesperson.
But I mean, the problem with coming across as an expert advisor is you actually need to be an expert advisor. And to be an expert advisor, I mean, you need to have business acumen so that you actually understand the bigger picture. You can make a real ROI case that the CFO will listen to. You need to understand more than just your product and the features of it. And you probably need to have a deep understanding of the space that you're in. Since
COVID, everyone's working remotely. And of course, when we were all in offices, the people that benefited most weren't senior heads. It was the junior heads that got to learn from everybody else around, right? So that's a real problem right now, because the juniors don't get the opportunity to learn by osmosis through watching and learning from others, because we're all, working remotely. So for what it's worth, I'm a fan of bringing everyone back to the office, and we're in that journey ourselves. I genuinely think the reality is that sellers, by definition, have got a relatively limited capacity for learning. And the mistake we're making is teaching them to do things that the AI can do better than they can. And instead of focusing our energies on teaching them about our market, teaching them about the challenges that our buyers are having that we can help solve, and teaching them how to build that rapport, build that business case, come across as that expert advisor. Instead, we're obsessed with showing them how to do all their admin and show how the buttons work. And in reality, a decent sales process, we may not get into showing them the buttons until stage 2 or 3. Right. What really matters is really getting under the skin of what the challenges are that the customer's facing and what the competing priorities are. Right? Why should they focus on this particular project over and above the others? And if you're the guy who says to them, actually, I think you should probably get these other projects out of the way before we consider this, suddenly you're the person they go back to when they're ready to jump onto it. So build real relationships with your buyers, help them to have a big impact. There's so much focus at the moment on ROI as well. And for what it's worth, when I talk about a finance persona, it doesn't have to be the CFO. It's not always the CFO. Certainly in larger businesses, it may not be. But you do want someone responsible for the numbers that's going to understand why this is a priority over other projects and why they should focus their energies on getting this done because it's going to have this impact. And ultimately, they want the same ROI as everybody else. But if you bring them on that journey, you're much more likely to see the right outcome.
How do you incentivize sellers to do that, though? Because the problem is obviously if you as a seller tell the prospect, hey, I think you should be focused on these priorities first, and let's talk in 2 quarters again. They have a quota for this quarter. And so they're pushing that out to maybe close in 3 or 6 months.
I think the answer is that the deal won't close anyway, because eventually the buyer's going to find out that they're going to realize that actually this isn't a high enough priority, or these other things we're working on are more high priority. We need to focus on that first. So all that's going to happen is you're going to waste a load of time. I think one of the data points that really revolutionized the way I was thinking about things was trying to understand how much coverage each rep needs to hit quota. Okay, because it can be wildly different across your sales team. And therefore, we've seen lots of examples where sales leaders are chastising the top performers because they don't have quite enough coverage, or they don't think they've got enough coverage, when in fact, they've got more than enough. They hit their number at the end of every quarter anyway, because they're being ruthless about what they qualify out. And we should be encouraging that, not pushing back. Especially at the moment, we saw a 25% increase in leads in the last 12 months. So we're spending all these businesses missed their target last year. And so how did they deal with it? They got rid of all their low performers. They hired everybody else's low performers. And then they spend a shed load more money on marketing to generate loads more leads. So now the sales team are inundated with leads. They've got no idea which ones match ICP. And they're not doing a good enough job at kind of qualifying the wrong ones out. While the top performers are still being ruthless. And as I mentioned earlier, they're closing 30% of their opportunities up as lost at that discovery stage. So our job is to, where we see the biggest change, when we onboard a customer, we go back and fix all the data associated to opportunities closed, won and lost in the past, and we use that to build the benchmarks. But the first thing we do for customers, we deliver them an insight report, and that's effectively an audit of the last 4 quarters, and we build leaderboards of how the AEs are performing. And all of that, what it does is it turns these insights into really easy to understand kind of pictures. And when you start to sit in front of the sellers and go, look, when we're multi-threaded, we win more. Look, when we get this persona engaged, we win more. And suddenly they understand, when we get these objections, we lose more. Or if we don't deal with those objections early, look what happens, right? And when you show them the data over a period of time, suddenly the penny drops. Now they want to win. Now they understand how to win because you've shown them in pictures. Look, when you get 6 stakeholders involved in the sales process, and look at the win rates. And of course they go, right, okay, I'm going to make sure that happens. And if you blend that with, teaching them about objection handling and qualification, and then the gates and triggers, being disciplined about the gates and triggers between the stage progression, suddenly in a very, very short amount of time, that desire to win, you'll see a dramatic impact on win rates and growth retention.
When you do this audit, and I know this is, it really depends on the company, but when you do these audits with customers, what are the suggestions that you find yourself making most often?
Well, it starts by understanding which relationships are driving revenue, how multi-threaded we need to be, which personas do we need to lean into, understanding ICP, absolutely key as well. Then we get into things like qualification methodologies. So It doesn't really matter which methodology you're using. And we don't need to worry about getting the reps to record it because they're all going to record it differently. So we need to let the AI do that. But what we need to do is train them on that qualification and be clear that unless they get the green thumbs up, so the system that we have will give you either a green thumbs up or a red thumbs down if you've qualified the customer well enough to lead discovery. And so you set the bars as to how important different parts of Medic are, or MedPick, or BANT, or Spice. And then the customer, the rep doesn't get to lead discovery until they get that green thumbs up. And believe me, it's very different gamifying it to a point where, oh shit, I've had 2 red thumbs down in the last week. I'm going to get better at my qualification. That's a world of difference to, oh, I've got to go back into Salesforce and put all my data in manually, and I'll just put in, is there a budget? Yes, that'll do, right? Because it's easy, because I'm busy, because and then we don't get consistency. And the beauty of AI is it can consistently analyze every discovery call, 1,000 of them over the last year, and we can score how well they're doing on their discovery. You can get the AI to tell us, what objections are being raised, and is a specific type of objection coming up more often than not than the past, and therefore we can train them on that objection handling. Or particular competitors are coming up more often. Great, we now need a battle card on that one. So the data will drive the right behaviors if you let it.
So the biggest ones are establishing some discovery framework, and it doesn't even really matter which one it is, but having consistency across reps, and then having a way to making sure that they actually follow it and giving a thumbs up and thumbs down. And then the other thing that I heard out of that is just understanding who are the decision makers and stakeholders we need to involve that drive up the close rate or the win rate that we get, so that reps can do that more.
Yeah, I mean, measuring engagement has been a game changer. That's why we've got 350 customers, right? We're the only player in the part that measures engagement and benchmarks the historical engagement against live opportunities. So that one piece of the puzzle in B2B sales, where relationships do drive revenue, has been a game changer for us and for our customers.
How much data do you need to make a meaningful assessment and with meaningful conclusions? I mean, I can imagine if you sell into enterprise, you might not have hundreds of customers or even opportunities. You might have a couple dozen or something like that.
Yeah, it's a fair point. We can't really build the benchmarks if you've got less than, say, 50 opportunities to have a look at. However, if you're working enterprise, and we had a customer, I won't name them, but their average sales cycle was 18 months, and they were winning 30% of their opportunities. And the big teams that were working on these were between 20 and 50 people. So the cost of running the sales process was vast. Mm-hmm. And even though they didn't necessarily have a huge amount of historical data, just by monitoring engagement, by connecting to things like their mailboxes, their calendars, we could show the customer very quickly when engagement started to drop off. And it wasn't unusual where the opportunity would stay live for 4 or 5 months, even after the right stakeholders just stopped engaging with that buying group. And so knowing when momentum starts to drop, understanding that people have started to cancel meetings, they're not turning up, that we're not getting the momentum or engagement, means that we can either step in and course correct and re-engage with the C-suite. If you want us to stop talking to you, we can, but let's have an honest conversation here. Or close it off as lost. And it's game changing because we're still only winning less than 30% of the opportunities we're working on, right? So there's so much inefficiency in the sales teams. And if we can get cleverer about monitoring momentum and keeping aware of which opportunities are real and which ones are progressing through the stages and which ones aren't, then I'll give you another example. We had a customer where their average sales cycle was 100. But once a sales process went past 100 days, the win rates just dropped off a cliff. Okay, mm-hmm. They had over 120 opportunities that were over 300 days old. Okay, the win rate on those opportunities was 2%. Right, but they didn't know it, and they used it as a comfort blanket, right? We've got this pipeline, it'll all be fine. But of course, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, when is the right time to consider an opportunity close lost? And I'm struggling with this myself. Sometimes someone books a demo, and they let's say they cancel the demo the day before. Do I consider that lost? Do I follow up twice? Do I follow up for 3 months?
I think, look, there's a difference between kind of top of the funnel. Arguably, if someone's requested a demo, they're not actually in a sales process yet, right? So, there's top of the funnel where we've just not had an opportunity to engage with them. They don't understand the impact we can have on their business, for example, versus being in a sales cycle. And one of the data points that I think most people should be aware of by now is understanding, on average, how many days does each seller spend in each stage of the sales cycle, on average, and then when they win. And that delta is usually quite substantial. So, if you've got a conversion rate from stage 2 to stage 3 of 64%, and on average you're spending 55 days in stage, okay, but when you win, you're only spending 22 days in stage. Well, once you get past 22 days, our job as leaders is to kind of prompt them and go, look, doesn't look like this deal's progressing, okay? Yeah. And there's no point letting it go on and on and on. All it does is it reduces the win rates as we go. And so have an honest conversation with the buyer, and let's take it out of the pipeline if it's not real.
So
the data will...
Do you take it out on day 23?
Perhaps, but we'll at least have a conversation on day 23, right? We really want to get under the skin of why, maybe there's a reason, maybe they've gone on holiday for a week, these things happen, right? Yeah. It's okay. And again, if your key persona is the VP of operations and it turns out that business doesn't have a VP of operations, right? Doesn't mean we close it off as lost, but we can recognize that we haven't engaged with the VP of operations. And as a leader, we can ask the question of our seller. And they might say, well, actually, they're called head of operations. Oh, okay, that's fine. We'll continue. Right? Or no, actually, there is a VP, but they don't want to talk to us. That's probably a red flag to say this might not be real.
Yep. What do you think about AI SDRs?
I think there's a place for AI in the sales cycle. I think it depends on what... I saw a great demo the other day of an AI bot that can join the calls to talk about security and legal. Mm-hmm. Now, again, it's amazing what these things can do. And I think if all you need is, I've got a question around your legal contract. Well, okay, let's book up a meeting in 2 weeks' time with the lawyers. Or actually, I can get the AI bot to join us. And, I think as long as you're honest with the customer about the fact that the AI bot understands our contract, should be able to answer any questions, and off you go. I think it's fine. And I think the same on the buyer. I think as long as you're honest with the buyer, I think it's fine. Personally, I don't like talking to an AI bot, and I'm not a big fan. And you can kind of tell. Eventually, I'm sure you won't be able to. I don't think it's I'm not sure. You're not building a relationship, let's put it that way. But it really depends on what you're selling, and if it can be automated to that level.
Yeah. I had this conversation with Henry Schuck on the podcast, and I want to ask you the same question, which is there's a lot of hype around AI, especially in go-to-market. When we look out for, let's say, just 2025, next 12 months, what do you think are the areas that AI is genuinely in go-to-market, disrupting, having a major impact? And then what are some of the hot air where it's just marketing, people try to tell you that AI is going to revolutionize something when in reality it doesn't help you with anything? If you want to separate those two things in your head.
So I was at the Pavilion GTM event in Austin, Texas a couple of weeks ago, and this topic came up, and it's really interesting. When technology progresses, eventually it won't be called AI; it will just be tech. Right now, it's seen as this special thing, but in reality, this is just a journey that we're going on, and eventually it'll just be kind of it'll be table stakes. The things that work. So, if you think pre-pandemic, we weren't really recording our meetings. Now, there's multi-billion-dollar businesses, and all they do is call recording. Okay, and it's amazing how fast the market moves and changes. And again, in B2B sales, which is the market, the areas I focus on, I still believe that relationships will continue to drive revenue. People want to build trust with their supplier. And I think there's a role to be, and that's where the human needs to be absolutely focused. And what AI is really, really good at is taking away all of the other distractions. Okay, at doing, making sure all of the CRM admin is done for them, analyzing every discovery call and scoring how well we've done, building out your follow-up email with all the objections and the agreements and the things we agree to, the AI can do that for us. And then you can read it, make sure you're happy with it, push the button. And if you're not happy with it, you can tweak it, and then the AI will learn from that as well. So I think facilitating makes a lot of sense. I think AI will continue to allow our revenue generators to spend more of their time building relationships and generating revenue rather than being distracted by stuff that they were never very good at in the first place. So that's what I think is good. I think on the other side, I think I've got to be a bit cautious on some of this stuff. I have some concerns over some of the data points we're seeing around things like intent that seems to be AI driven. I think there's a lot of intent signals out there, and a lot of them are not necessarily worth the weight that others are. So I would be cautious. I'd be cautious about intent data. I think first party intent data is great. I think third party intent data can be misleading. Again, depends on your market. So I think that's probably an area to be cautious on.
Yeah. Now we've talked a lot about now what you see in the market and what you've seen with customers, but obviously you're the founder and CEO of a company that's approaching 10 million in ARR. I'm curious, if you look back at, we're now on November 5th, if you look back over 2024, what were some of the things that worked for you guys, and what were some of the things that you tried that didn't work for you guys?
Oh, well, that's a very big question. And I'm not sure it's necessarily technology related. I think we got through a lot of change this year. And a lot of that change has come because we found ourselves in a place where the business was turning into a bunch of silos. Each department was kind of doing its own thing. They had their own goals, and it wasn't working as well as it could. Right? We made.
You knew it was not working. The growth wasn't where you wanted it to be, or were there other symptoms?
Politics started getting involved in the business. And
how many people are you guys?
We were 47. We're now 30. So we reduced the number of heads, in particular some of the more senior heads were kind of building their own fiefdoms, their own kind of individual kind of pieces. And we've become a lot more collaborative as a single unit. And we're working now much more closely as a single team. We've made the customer our primary objective. Our primary goal is to support the customers. And everything we do now has to kind of justify that focus. And that collaboration means we're now growing faster than we ever have done. And it's a lot more fun to go to work as well, because everyone's kind of pulling in the same direction.
So when you think about that, what were some of the biggest levers that you pulled? Was it just identifying those leaders who are politicking? And
I think in hindsight, I should have made the decision a year earlier. I think as well as being the CEO of Ebsta, I'm also the CEO ambassador for the Pavilion community. And I spend a lot of my time hosting dinners for a lot of my time. Once a month, I host a dinner somewhere in the world with a dozen CEOs around the table. And consistently, people are struggling with, that head's not right, or I've got this founder that I used to work with, and it's just, things aren't moving in the right direction. And they struggle with the kind of, should I make a decision? Should I move on from this? Should we, step up? And for me, I was I was committed to the team we had and wanted to make it work for them. But in reality, I should have made the decision, a year earlier. And I suppose anyone listening, if you've got big decisions to make, even however scary it sounds, it won't be anywhere near as bad as you think it will be. And the sooner you get through it, the sooner you do it, the sooner you'll be through the other side.
Right. And so did you end up with a leaner management layer overall, or are you planning to replace all of those key leaders? Or how are you thinking about if you let go of some people, you're back to 30 people, as you now grow back up to 40, 50 people, how are you approaching hiring differently?
Hire the most senior people you can is usually the headline. I was, again, through the pavilion community, I met some really good people. I've brought in 4 fractional heads effectively, one for go-to-market, one for product, one for development, and one for finance. And bringing those fractional heads in, there was kind of no nonsense. The team still felt they were empowered. But we brought these people in to help us to really run a lot faster. And again, I'm hoping that some of those will be more than just fractional as we move forward.
Now, given that this is mostly go-to-market focused podcast, if you think about that fractional head of go-to-market, or maybe even before that, what were some of the go-to-market initiatives that are working for you right now? And then how are you thinking about 2025, what to expand, what to cut, what experiments to run?
Yeah, really good question. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we play the market, it's very competitive, right? So, we've got some massive players that we come up against, and we do well when we're up against them. I think we win 60% of the opportunities when we're head to head with a Gong or a Clary, which is great. The challenge is that they've both got 500 sellers. We have 3. So how do we, and so the challenge the biggest challenge we've got is pipeline generation, right? It's getting people to know that we exist. So one of the things that we really lent into is our benchmark report. So because we analyze so much data, as I mentioned earlier, we analyzed 4.7 million opportunities last year. We also analyzed over 1.2 million hours of sales calls. So using that information, that data to develop insights and talk to the market about the benchmarks and what's going on in the market means I get an opportunity to get on stage more and more often. My job now is, we get invited to PE house kickoffs where we get to sit in front of a whole community of businesses that could buy what we sell, and we focus on giving before we receive. So if I can help deliver some content and help people understand what the latest trends are or what the biggest challenges are that people are facing, it raises our profile. And then suddenly when people are having those challenges, they pick up the phone and we get the opportunity to come talk to them about what we do. So For me, community is absolutely key. The other big motion that we've really focused in on is partnerships. So we have, I think we've got 18 partners now that introduce us to their customers. We have a really tight partner program. So kind of RevOps consultancy businesses and growth agencies, we actually help power their audits. So we give them a little tool that allows them to kind of analyze all of this data and include it as part of their audits. And of course, that means they get to recommend that the customer becomes more data driven, and they probably need a revenue intelligence platform, and that's kind of where we get recommended in. And we give our partners a recurring revenue stream as well, so they're encouraged and incentivized to keep us in the loop, and vice versa. So trying to find ways of going to market that aren't putting us head to head with these big juggernauts, and really explaining why we're different and how every customer matters to us. When you've got X thousand of these customers, then you're just a number for these other businesses. So that's kind of how we try and differentiate ourselves.
And so going into 2025, Q1, Q2, where are you looking to put more resources? So
we on both those two. So we're working on the 2025 benchmark reports. So that will be launched hopefully in January. And we are continuing to invest in partnerships. So we're enabling and activating partners, helping them to win new business and new logos, and means that we more likely win new business and new logos as well. So those are the motions that we're really focused on for next year.
How do you think about LinkedIn? It looks like especially the whole go-to-market tech scene is a lot on LinkedIn. I mean, there's obviously Sam Jacobs, very active, Adam Robinson, Chris Walker, which also might obviously Gong, lots of their sales reps and AEs are very active on LinkedIn. How do you think about that place as a way to reach more people?
Yeah, it's certainly something we lean into. I try and post every day if I can. I don't have quite as many followers as Sam or Adam right now, but working on it. And again, just trying to keep the conversation going online. just trying to be genuine, right? I think we've all had the kind of third parties trying to do it on our behalf, and it doesn't always get the level of traction you're looking for. And it's amazing how a little video of me dressed up for Halloween gets loads of engagement. In fact, but the more stupid I tend to look online, the more engagement I get. So
that's the smell of the internet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you think of LinkedIn as a way to stay in touch with existing customers, as a way to build more partnerships? Is it a way to make people known about Ebsta that don't know about Ebsta? All of the above? Like, what's the main thing?
Yeah, I think it's very top of the funnel. I think it's about making people aware that Ebsta exists. One of the challenges we had with the benchmark report is that people thought we were an analytics business, not a software company. And so we're going to make changes to the way we present the content. So not just saying, look, here's the data in the market, here's the problems that we're seeing. We're now going to introduce another slide that says, and here's how Ebsta solves that challenge, right? So sometimes being British, we almost shy away from actively promoting what we do, and it had unintended consequences. We ended up being perceived as this kind of analytics business rather than a software business that helps drive quota attainment for sellers.
Yep. Cool. Maybe last question. Anything that's like top of mind for you going into end of year? Like, what are you most thinking about? What are you planning? Where's your head at right now in November 2024?
I think the market is in its infancy for us. We live in this kind of, there's a revolution coming where sales has been the last department to become data driven. And I think there's a huge opportunity. I think we're seeing an explosion in kind of RevOps consultancy, RevOps services, growth consultancy. I think there's so much inefficiencies in the way the sales teams are operating. And what we're seeing is in every market, there's a player that's becoming a lot more data driven and starting to accelerate away from the rest of their marketplace. And so if you're not leaning into that, if you're not being data driven, if you don't understand all these data points we've been talking about today, and you've got a system that just does it for you, the chances are your competitors do. And so I think we're at the very early stages. I think this year is going to be an incredible year for the market. I think we're going to see it's almost a revolution coming around how we can make the whole front office and go-to-market teams so much more productive by just making them a lot more data-driven without burdening them with the admin required to be data-driven. And there's this kind of unique scenario coming along. The other thing that we're seeing is these more traditional markets and industries. They make this weird thing called profit that I've never heard of before, but suddenly they're all now in the cloud and they look across at SaaS with envious eyes, and they want the benefits that we've been talking about and the impact you can have on these businesses that perhaps are 2 or 3 generations behind the tech stack, and suddenly can kind of leapfrog. And all those challenges we saw in the last few years of us buying every damn bit of tech you could find, but it's still not really affecting quota attainment. These more traditional businesses have kind of waited patiently, and I think now they're coming online. And our largest customer is an oil and gas business, a Fortune 500 oil and gas business. So they're nothing to do with SaaS, but they see the value in scoring engagement, understanding relationships, revenue intelligence, and driving quota attainment through data sets. So I think the more traditional markets are starting to be aware of what they need to be thinking about, and I think it's going to be a really exciting year ahead.
Amazing. Well, that's a good high note to wrap up on. So thank you for your time, Guy. If people after this are interested in checking you out or Ebsta out, both your LinkedIn profile and the website to Ebsta will be in the description down below. And so, Guy, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vin. And if we can, maybe we can also include a link to download the benchmark report. It's completely free.
Sure.
And, I'm useful for your audience as well. So cool. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being here and looking forward to hearing the podcast.